Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to The Unspoken Truth. I'm your host, Robert Bruss, and I'm joined by my good mate, Ed Anderson, over there in Minnesota. How you doing, Ed?
Living the dream, Robbie.
Happy 4th of July, mate.
Yeah, thank you, man. Yeah, it's hot and humid, and it almost makes me want winter.
Be careful what you wish for, pal.
I know, exactly. for like a minute, and then, yeah.
I was saying to Susie yesterday, we have only 2 seasons in Sydney. It's either really hot or really cold, one or the other. There's nothing in between. So I'm looking forward for the weather to warm up. I went in the ocean the other day and, oh my God, it was like properly cold. The water's cold. The air temperature's not too bad, but when you get out and the wind is blowing on you after it's wet, it's some proper ice bath treatment there for you, but you feel like $1 million on the other side of that. Do you ever get into the frozen lakes and do some Wim Hof treatment for yourself?
We have the ice fishing thing here every winter. Ice. And I used to go out and do some ice fishing, sure. And of course, some people have what they call the Polar Bear Club. I'm sure you've seen, these Russian videos in the middle of winter, Russian to go out and they chip the hole. Yeah, we have people who do that here too.
That's a thing, hey?
That is a thing. Yeah. I have never done that, but I have jumped into a frozen ocean when I was up in the Arctic Circle. But there wasn't ice. It was just really, really cold. Salt water is not doesn't freeze as easily.
Doesn't freeze as easily. Yeah.
Did
you have a wetsuit on, or did you jump in just with your shorts on?
Wetsuits. Wetsuits are for girls.
I love it, man. I love it. Nothing better than a bit of cold water therapy in Sydney. Here, when you come here to Australia and I host you, mate, we'll take you out and do some of that because it's actually really pleasant. It's actually nice. We'll get you out of the wind and in the sunshine.
Hey, I'm up for it. Especially if it's a hot. Well, I guess it wouldn't be cold water on a hot day, would it? So,
well, for some reason, it seems to be freezing cold all the way into summer too. So either way, you're going to get the cold water.
We have 2 seasons here too. But we call it winter and construction.
I love it. I always think Americans are the same as Aussies, but you look the same, you sound the same, but it's always very different.
Well, we'll see. When I come there, when I go there, and I will get there. When I get there, I'll take notes and we'll compare.
We'll compare. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Unspoken Truth. Thanks for indulging Ed and I there on the front of the show there. We like to have a little bit of fun and have a bit of a chat on the front end of the podcast as well. We're available as a podcast over on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you can download your favorite audio content. You can get us over there. We're also on Twitter, Rumble, and on Telegram, and all of the links to everything that we're talking about today are in the description below. Let's get into it because we've got a lot going on. There's some scary stuff happening in the world. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant crisis is getting worse, and I spent some time yesterday putting some slides together to show everybody what's actually going on, and I want to take a couple of minutes to join the dots for everybody because I think this might escalate into something beyond what you could possibly ever hope to imagine. While you're tuning in here, folks, if you're joining us live, make sure you drop a comment in there. Let us know where you're coming from and let us know your feedback on any of the stories that we've got going on. As I talk about the nuclear power plant there, I'm going to ask you to ask yourself a question. Is this going to trigger Article 5? According to the Americans, yes, it will. So that means NATO will be involved in the war. And all of this might happen literally in the next couple of days. Now, I know I've spoken about this in the last couple of weeks a few times, but this seems to be escalating to a crescendo, and I hope that I'm completely wrong. I've never wanted to be more wrong about the predictions that I make on this show than ever, because if this does happen, it will be one of the biggest catastrophes in human history, and I'm hoping that doesn't happen, and I hope that I'm completely wrong and I'm reading the tea leaves wrong, but I'll leave it to the audience to decide how accurate I am or not. On the second half of the show, Ed's got a little bit of information for us about the Supreme Court and how they slapped down affirmative action and what that actually means to American society, because that's a good thing, right?
It's a good thing for freedom-loving Americans, yeah. It's terrible news for the liberals.
One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, isn't it? I'm going to think of another analogy. I can't say the terrorist word on YouTube here. We're going to get in trouble if we do that. We had a bit of a conversation about all of that happening and getting started. Ed, what does the 4th of July weekend mean to you? I'd just love to get your American take on that before we kick off, because I know here in Australia we have Australia Day, which is all the fun police take that away all the time. The Liberals and the leftists here in Australia want to cancel Australia Day and change the date. There's a campaign to change the date. and all these leftists and liberals call it Invasion Day. And I'm like, oh my God, just nobody alive today did anything wrong to any of those people. Yes, there was problems. Yes, it was pretty shitty. And yes, they can, there was crimes and all sorts of bad stuff happened. But man, oh man, like at what point do I have to stop paying for the sins of the past? I didn't commit any of those sins, and neither did the people calling for the change of the dates or calling it Invasion Day. They weren't on the receiving end of it either. Just ridiculous, man. And to me, like, all the fun has gone away from something that should be a celebration of what makes us all great.
Yeah, well, amen. And liberals are perpetually unhappy people.
They don't smile or laugh or get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and drink coffee.
Right. Their idea of fun is to pick a fight about some obscure thing that you enjoy doing. But listen, 4th of July for me is it's an excuse. It's a chance to reflect on what exactly America stands for. I am a history nut, and I like to use this time of year to watch all of the old movies and documentaries around the Declaration of Independence, and to remind ourselves of where we came from. And that's what all these holidays are really should be meant for, whether it's Christmas, Easter, 4th of July, Memorial Day. These are little benchmarks, little touch points to connect you to the past, to connect you to your forebears, to kind of remind you of why you believe the things that you do. Now, it's just unfortunate that our country right now is so tribal that we have a lot of people in this country who generally hate America and what it stands for. But that's because of really bad parenting and a really bad school system. Our school system now are indoctrination camps. So most kids these days, most young people, even a lot of adults for that matter, don't really appreciate the values that America was founded on. So I use this time of year to reflect on that and to remind myself of those kind of things. And I just hope that I don't have to relocate to some Eastern European country in order to enjoy freedom again. Last week we're talking about immigrants, the two of us, and on the show, and immigrants tend to make the best Americans because they choose to come here, right? They weren't born here, they wanted to come here, especially those who came here legally. They went through the trouble of doing it right, and yes, it took 5 or 10 years for it to happen, but they wanted to get here because they believed in the values of America. Those are the kind of immigrants you want. You don't want the kind of immigrants like we're seeing in France right now, who have no interest in the values of France. They just want to take advantage of. And same thing here in America. We have a lot of illegals here who don't have any particular interest in the freedoms and the values that we stand for. They just want the money. It's about the money.
Yeah, it's a very, very disconcerting time in history. And when you look at what's actually going on in the world, it kind of makes you question what you think and what you actually feel. I'm a believer of you've got to concentrate on the things that you can control and try not to be too affected by all of that craziness that's happening around you. And everything that you put on as it means values, right, is really just a self-imposed thing. If you value something, if you value your freedom and you're a patriot and you believe in all of those things, well, then that's a beautiful thing. That's up to you to have that and to have that happen. But don't let those other crazy people around you on the left and people throwing rocks and Molotov cocktails bring you down or make you feel sad about all of those things. Because if it makes you feel good to wake up in the morning and look up at that flag and, make sure it's all squared away and make sure that you feel good about being an American, doing the right things and ticking all the right boxes, being a good person, then you should continue to do that. Don't worry about all the crazies around you, man.
Yeah, and for you patriots out there, if you really want to make your liberal friends' heads explode, what you do is it's not that hard. You just get in the biggest gas guzzling car you can find, go to the store, load up on the biggest steaks you can find, and then put it on a wood burning charcoal grill and make as big a bonfire as you can. Get those CO2, and light out those fireworks there, and invite all of your liberal friends to watch you do all that and just watch them.
Now, that's the way to celebrate 4th of July right there. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. I want to get into today's show, folks, and I want to share with you why I think Ukraine are shaping the battlefield and the media landscape for a nuclear disaster. And you might be watching this and thinking about this, thinking, well, why does this even matter? Why should I pay any attention to this? So let me just kick off with a video I played last week, but I just edited this just slightly for the most important points. And I think it really highlights exactly why you need to pay attention to this. So this video is from Wednesday last week, my time, so Tuesday last week, US time. So let's take a little look.
Putin could be tempted to use a tactical nuclear weapon, or, just as likely, try to destroy the main nuclear power plant. Both actions would have dire consequences for the health of Ukraine, but also surrounding NATO nations. Poland is at immediate risk if the use of tactical nuclear weapons or destruction of a nuclear power plant causes radiation to spread, as almost certainly it would, causing significant human harm. This is not a kind of reckless or panicky resolution. It's based on fact and science, and it is meant to send a message to Vladimir Putin, and even more directly to his military. Right. They will be destroyed. They will be eviscerated if they use tactical nuclear weapons, or if they destroy a nuclear plant in a way that threatens surrounding NATO nations. Article 5 is there for a reason.
And our message is to those around Putin that if you do this, if you follow his order, if he ever gives it, you can expect a massive response from NATO, and you will be at war with NATO. I can't believe that NATO nations would allow their countries to be irradiated by a nuclear attack emanating in Ukraine, not to consider that attack on the neighboring country and NATO writ large.
Putin could...
All of that sounds really dire and dark and scary. I just want to unpick what Mr. Blumenthal said there at the start. He said Putin may use a tactical nuclear weapon. By the way, there's no such thing as a tactical nuclear weapon, right? It just means a smaller nuke is what he's saying. He may use that, or he may blow up the power plant. And notice how they say consistently blow up the power plant. They're consistently saying that. They're shaping the media. They're at a press conference, and these two Washington hawks are saying that he might do that. But the reality is I might do a lot of stuff in my day today, but you have no idea what I may or may not do. And he's speculating. And then a little bit further on, he says, this is based on fact and science. Well, what fact and what science? Because you just said like less than 30 seconds ago, he may do something. He may use a tactical nuke, or he may blow up the power plant, but it's based on fact and science. So is fact, you know, what the government has said about facts and science in the last couple of years, I just can't believe any of it. You're just saying whatever the hell you want to say to create a narrative that you want everyone else to follow, because people just see the headlines. And I'm going to show you these headlines in just a second and join the dots for you and why I think this is closer than ever before. So when I rewatched all of that, and I've been looking at what's happening in the media in the last couple of days, the unspoken truth is I believe that they're shaping the battlefield for this to actually happen, because there's no way that the Ukrainians are going to break through the Russian lines. It doesn't seem like it. It doesn't seem like they're going to break through the Russian lines in the south unless they have air support. And the only way for them to get air support is to bring NATO into the war. And I think the NATO commanders actually understand that in order for the infantry to move forward and the armor to move forward and take those positions without extraordinary losses, because there's just not that many Ukrainians left to go on the offensive. If there's 10 or 20,000 of them to go on the offensive, they can be a very, very effective force so long as they've been put together with combined arms. And combined arms means air, artillery, and armor. It doesn't mean, and engineers as well, right? It doesn't mean just engineers going forward, blowing minefields and sending tanks up, and then infantry in maneuver warfare. It won't work because the Russians have got aviation to stop that, and they're dug into defensive positions. And if they're going to take a 3-1 loss inside of on the offensive like that, there's no way the Ukrainians are going to break through those lines. And even if they did, they're going to take significant losses. So I believe that they're shaping the battlefield for that. And the reason I say that is because just in the last couple of days, the Serbian president came out and said this. So this is the president of Serbia. He said, "Now I expect a big offensive by Ukraine in two directions, one towards Bakhmut in the east and a much more significant one to Urgadar and Melitopol in the south." So that's just south of Zaporizhzhia. I think that they have prepared several dozen brigades, so 10,000 or so people, and will break through the Russian defenses in this region. Now, I don't think so. I think they've prepared the brigades. I think they're ready to go, but I think they're going to get their asses handed to them. And I've been saying for a little while now, the problem with all of this is I believe that this is the last throw of the dice for the Ukrainians. And part of the reason I think that this is the last throw of the dice is because I'll show you a little thing I saw this morning about what Dmitry Medvedev said about this war. So he said, Russia's Medvedev says the standoff with the West is going to last decades and the Ukrainian conflict is going to be something that is permanent. What? How on earth are we going to end something that is permanent? Is it just going to be like what happened in Donbass and Luhansk in the east, where they've been at war literally since 2014, and the Ukrainians are shelling, civilians in that part of the world because the military are taking refuge amongst that population, and if you want to target the military, then we're going to blow up that house, and in the process, they're killing lots of people. So my worry is that the NATO summit in Vilnius is coming up in the next couple of days. And in order for them to be invited into NATO or get some sort of invitation we need to show some sort of progress. So we need to do something. And that's what the Serbian president was saying, that I think it's going to happen in the next couple of days. And my worry is that when they go on the offensive and start doing that, we're talking about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. So I just wanted to show people a couple of pictures of this and just remind you of what it is. So there's six turbines in there, right? And if you look to the right of the picture, you can see the cooling ponds, and you can see the water coming out of the cooling ponds. And to the left of the picture is where all of the storage goes for all of the old spent fuel rods. But we know from the dam blowing up, this is actually before the dam blew up, and the big thing on the bottom right, the big square on the bottom right, is the cooling pond, right, where all the spent fuel is. And now after the dam is blown up, this is what it looks like. So this is the before and this is the after. So all of the water is gone, and if I zoom into the picture for you, that's the before and this is the after. So you can see in the before shot how the water gets into that cooling pond in the top left, the bottom left of where the cooling pond is. You can see there's a little gap in there, and they can pump the water in there from the outside as well, of course. But now that there's no more water left in the river, there's no way to get water into the cooling pond. Then they've said that, look, there's enough water there to last about a month without it actually making any difference. And they've come out in the last couple of days and said that they've got the ability to pump water into it now, so it's going to be okay. But here's the problem with all of this, folks. The Ukrainians continue to say that the Russians have mined 4 of the 6 reactors, and they've parked trucks full of explosives in 4 of the 6 reactors. So everybody's saying, well, these reactors can take a big hit. They could take a direct hit from an artillery round and nothing's going to happen to them, and that may be true. But if there's vehicles parked on the inside of the reactors, that's going to be a problem. So the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, this little article here I've got says is from the 30th. So this is from 5 days ago now. They've said that we haven't found any indication of that. So you're saying that the Russians have mined the actual power plant itself. Well, we've got people there saying that no, the Russians haven't mined it. So here's an independent body going against the grain of what the Ukrainians are saying. And they're going against the grain of what Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham are saying there. So they're independent. They're like, no, the Russians haven't done it. Stop saying that. Then they haven't done it. So they haven't mined the cooling pond, this cooling pond here. They haven't mined that. And no, they haven't mined the reactors. That's what they're saying. So when I look at the additional parts of the media, these are some of the things that I see. So I just want to show you some of these headlines. Russia planned to blow up Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has been drafted and approved. Burdenov, so that's the Ukrainian chief of Ukrainian military, warns of a dangerous escalation. So these articles are all from the last 2 days. So in the last 2 days, this is what they've been saying. So my question to you, ladies and gentlemen, that are listening to this and watching this is, do you think for a second, for a nanosecond, that the Russian military, someone in the Russian military goes, you know what we should do? We should rig the power plant to blow. Because if they come and take back the ground in this stupid counteroffensive they're talking about, we should blow up the nuclear power plant. Is anybody in the Russian military saying that? No. No person, no sane person in their right mind is saying that. And the Ukrainians are saying, well, we told you last year that when they took the dam, that they rigged the dam to blow, and now they blew the dam. I don't know, man. Okay, dam, it's water. Okay, cool. Nuclear power plant, I think Ukraine and Russia have got long memories when it comes to Chernobyl. I think they know what the result of that would be. And if they blew up 4 of the 6 reactors that were there, it would create a nuclear catastrophe of the scale and the size that we've never ever seen. But I think that Lindsey Graham and Senator Blumenthal want America and NATO to enter the war so they can use their air force to shape the battlefield there so the counteroffensive goes ahead so that the Ukrainians can take back Crimea. But I don't think it's as easy as that or even as simple as that. Even if they did blow up the plant and that all happened and the Air Force came in and started doing that, I think the Ukrainians are still going to get their asses handed to them. It's just, the escalation is ridiculous. Now, if I just click on some of these other articles, it's like Russia is reducing its presence at the nuclear power plant. So they're saying, again, the Ukrainian intelligence chiefs claimed that staff have been told to relocate to Crimea and military patrols have been scaled back. Well, maybe that's in anticipation of a counteroffensive and the Russians have intelligence to say, hey, let's get out of here before they come and kill us all. Or is that in anticipation of a nuclear event? And now around the Zaporizhzhia area, there's a whole lot of activity getting ready for a nuclear event. So they're training for it. So the picture that you see there, it says rescue workers and police officers attend anti-radiation drills in case of an emergency situation in Zaporizhzhia. So I look at that and think, is this thing hot? Is all of this staged? Is it real? And then I couldn't find the video. I saw it on another YouTube channel, but I couldn't dig it out for the life of me. And I couldn't really use that video because the guy that was talking was standing in front of it. The Ukrainians created a propaganda video that said, Russia is about to blow up the nuclear power plant. And so this guy, his channel is Canadian Prepper. But Canadian Prepper stops the Ukrainian video midway and he goes, look, that's the urban prepper. So there's a fella in a gas mask, but it's from the Urban Prepper's channel, yeah? And he's doing a review on a gas mask, like an NBC gas mask. So the Ukrainians are creating these propaganda videos from content from an American prepper. And then a little bit further on, another 2 or 3 seconds into the video, there's the Urban Prepper's daughter looking like, oh, scared, all of this. So first of all, you're using somebody else's content to create your propaganda videos, and I'm sure the Urban Prepper doesn't want to be drawn into Ukrainian propaganda, and then you're using his kid in there as well. Whatever, man, you know, it's the internet. That's what happens if you put your kids out there and you put your content out there, someone else is going to use it. But I look at it all and I think, this is all staged. These photos are staged. That's a professional photographer has taken that photo. No one has just snapped that with their iPhone or their Android phone. That's a professional photo that someone's got going on there. So if we go on a little bit further, and it says here, Russian forces begin to flee Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, Ukrainian defense intelligence. So once again, from 5 days ago, this article, the Ukrainians are shaping the media landscape for something to actually happen. And they're starting off by saying, the Russians are leaving, the Russians are leaving, the Russians are leaving. Well, hang on a second. Let's just be real for a second. The people that work in the nuclear power plant there are not Russians. They're Ukrainians. The people that live in the Zaporizhzhia area, drive around to the power plant and go to work every day, they live in Ukraine because the power plant is in Ukraine. They're not Russians. But you just see the headline, Russian forces begin to flee. So what is that? The guard, the infantry that are there, the armor brigade that is there, as a security detail, are they leaving? Maybe, but you're making it sound like all of the staff that work there, that are Ukrainians, are Russian and they're now leaving. So you're using language and words, and the unspoken truth is this is all a psyop. It's a psyop in the event that something happens. And the minute that it happens, everyone's going to say, Ukraine blew up its own power plant. No, we've been telling you for weeks now. For weeks and weeks we've been telling you the Russians rigged it, the Russians. And I'm like, I don't know, man. And look at this one. The Russians may be preparing to trigger the nuclear power plant explosion. And here's the next one. Russia can remotely blow up the power plant after handing it to Ukraine. Zelensky saying that. Like, what do you see when you're hearing this, Ed? What do you think? Is it all bullshit?
It is all bullshit. Listen, for several reasons. First one is Lindsey Graham said that, well, this could be a disaster. It would affect Poland the most because they're right on the border. Well, I just look at my map, and Crimea is a lot closer to this power plant than Poland is.
And so is Russia. Is a lot closer than Poland is.
So right. And the prevailing wind in that part of the world is from west to east.
Yeah, exactly.
So Russia's not going to blow this up because they're going to have Chernobyl. Moscow is not that far away, really, from there. So, I mean, St. Petersburg is further, but Moscow is closer than St. Petersburg even. But no, so I don't buy this idea that Russia would want to blow this up at all. I think that listen, Lindsey Graham, he is obsessed with Putin. He's always hated this guy. And Lindsey Graham largely went along with this Russian hoax with Trump because he hated Putin so much. He wanted to blame Putin. So he's just obsessed with Putin. And so I think this press conference was all about finding an excuse or to justify. They're trying to find a justification for NATO going in.
That's it. And they introduced, so the whole press conference was about, and I cut out the first part of it, but it was about introducing legislation to say that if a nuclear disaster occurs, you don't have to use a nuclear weapon. But if they blow up this power plant, and that's why they're very careful in what they're saying at that press conference, and they continue to say, if he blows up the power plant, they must have said it like 9 or 10 times between the two of them in a 2-minute video, then that's also going to trigger Article 5. And it seems to me like those two people are in cahoots together and are planning to do something like this. And what's the thing that they could do that would cause the least amount of problem? Well, that's not blowing up the reactors. That's going to cause the most problems. The least problem that they could cause would be blowing up the side of the cooling pond, and all of the water leaks out of the cooling pond, and then all of the spent fuel rods are exposed, and all of a sudden the radiation is leaking. That's probably the most controlled thing that they could actually do. I look and think, have you rigged the reactors? Are you really going to blow the reactors up? Man, because if you blew up 4 of those reactors, that would bring the full force of NATO into it. And then we are literally in World War III. And I look at that and just think, whichever way you try and skin this cat, whichever way you look at it, they're shaping the battlefield to blame Russia for the destruction of the power plant. Look, blame Ukraine in case of any emergency. Russians tell Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant personnel.
There it is. There you go.
So they're trying to, the way you describe it is they're trying to get ahead of the narrative. And the way you describe that is they're shaping the narrative before it actually unfolds in anticipation of something like this going on. Well, so I when I come back to this picture here, this seems to me like the most plausible thing that they can do. So if you look on the right-hand side of the cooling pond, you can see the 6 reactors. They're quite small in the picture because the satellite photo is high up. But it wouldn't be a stretch to actually destroy the side of this dam and, to rig it with some explosives and, well, not the dam, the cooling pond, but to rig it with some explosives and to get all the water to leak out of that, in which case all of the water leaks out and then the radiation is exposed. And I just think that all of this will bring NATO into the war properly. And that's what Lindsey Graham wants. He wants that. That's what Zelensky wants as well.
Okay, let me ask you. what's the benefit to Russia right now having a nuclear reactor? Is Russia getting any of the electricity that's being produced by this?
Well, as I was doing the research and grabbing all those screen grabs yesterday, and I was putting that together, as far as I could tell, the whole reactor had been shut down and had been put into the whole plant rather had been put into idle mode. And then this morning, when I was looking through Telegram, I saw an article saying one of the reactors had been turned back on and it was producing power and it was producing electricity.
Oh, who's getting the electricity?
Ukraine.
Yeah. So Russia isn't. So what is the benefit for Russia in having this guy at all?
Well, they're just holding the ground, right? So they own the left side of the river, of the bank there, and that happens to be there, so they own the ground. They're not going to hold the ground and give Ukraine a little enclave of their own territory like that.
Okay. So I've got a little solution for this issue. Let me run this by you and let me see what you think. All right. So if I were Putin, or if I were an advisor to Putin, I'd say, you know what? You could gain some real bonus points, some real brownie points with the West. If you invited them to come in with a peacekeeping force, like the UN's famous peacekeeping force, right? Say, all right, you guys, so within this 3-mile diameter around you guys are in charge of it. So Russia won't have it, and Ukraine won't have it, and you guys just make sure that nuclear power plant is nice and safe.
It's neutral territory.
Yeah, neutral territory, right? That way, if something can happen, Russia can't be blamed. So if I were Putin would look like a reasonable guy. He would look like
that's how they would get ahead of the narrative that the Ukrainians are trying to create, right? Because the Russians, I would say, the Russians are just normal, reasonable people, and on the other side, they'd be like thinking, why would we ever blow up our own power plant? These guys are crazy. They think they're going to blow it up and then blame it on us, and then I think the Ukrainians looking, going, oh, the Russians are going to rig it. They're going to blow it up. Like I'm just like, nobody is going to blow up the power plant. Whoever's blowing that power plant up is doing it on purpose to bring NATO into the war. Yes. So who stands to benefit the most? The only people that benefit out of the power plant being destroyed is Ukraine, not Russia. So why would Russia ever do that? It's just insane, man.
So just bring in a neutral party. Let them, handle it, and then it's off the table.
Well, that's how Putin could solve that problem, right?
Yeah, I would think.
The neutral party that he brought in was the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency. They've come in and said, yeah, everything's all right here. There's no explosives here. What are you talking about? They mine the outside of it, but they can't control the perimeter, so they put mines there. They haven't mined the...
Okay. Look, the IAEA, these are just nuclear engineer nerds, right? They're I'm not bringing a proper force, right? Yeah. Like the UN peacekeeping force. All right, that's your perimeter, and all the Russian soldiers will leave, and all the Ukrainian soldiers will leave, and no people in there are people needed to run the damn plant.
So my problem with all of this is that we're just days away from this happening, because I believe that the Ukrainians, the Serbian president is right in when he's saying that the Ukrainians need to do something because nothing's really happening. And in order for this NATO thing to actually work, we need to say, oh, look at all the gear that you've given to us and it's working, and they're on the offensive doing all of these things. So this might all come to a head to this giant crescendo in the next couple of days. And I'm really worried about that, because if there's a nuclear disaster and a nuclear emergency in Europe, and that does bring NATO into the war, by association, it brings Australia into a war in Europe as well. I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? A war in Europe? We're in Australia. We're in the southern hemisphere. We couldn't be any further away from the war in Europe. Fight your own freaking wars. And just sort I've just had enough. I've had enough of the craziness, and the politicians that get us into these wars, Boris Johnson and Joe Biden, who said no to the signed off negotiations. I don't know, maybe I'm an instrument of Putin when he says, look, here it is, there's a piece of paper with his signature on it. He signed it, we negotiated, we said we were going to stop fighting. And then Boris Johnson, where is he gone? He's gone. And then Joe Biden are like, no, don't do that. We'll supply you with all the weapons that you need to actually destroy Russia, and we'll do that. But it's at the cost of the Ukrainian population. And it's at the destruction of everybody else's economy and just total and complete chaos in Europe. It's not destabilizing Russia at all. It's destabilizing our economies and our side of it. And these politicians are so fast and so quick to get us into these conflicts. But the conflicts are so unbelievably complicated. There's no way that you could predict what's going to happen. You can't extract yourself from it, and they can't pull themselves out of it. And then everybody else gets drawn into it. This morning, Ed, this was the final nail in the coffin. Excuse the dark pun for you. I was watching a Telegram video. There's a Russian soldier with his hands up, the Ukrainian guy's at close quarters. He must be no more than 2 meters away from him. He's got his hands up like this. His body language is like, don't shoot, like that. He doesn't have a weapon. And the Ukrainian guy goes, come like that. And he gives him a shove, go down there, go that way. And he reaches down, there's a guy on the ground, and he's lying face down, and he's got his rifle. And as he reaches down, he pulls the rifle out and chucks it to the side like that. And the guy is face down in the dirt, and he's injured because you can see on his right leg, he's got a bandage around his calf muscle, and you can see the blood through the bandage. But he's lying face down like that, and he takes a step back. So he throws his rifle away. The other guy moves away. He takes a step back, and his rifle, the Ukrainian guy, is on full auto, and he dumps half a magazine into this guy who's laying face down with his hands like this underneath, like face down, and he dumps half a magazine into his head and into his back and runs away and goes, "Granada," like there's a grenade. And you can kind of hear like a pop in the background. I don't know if that's it. I don't know. I can't see. I wasn't there. But I'll rewound the video. When he takes the rifle away, can I see anything in the guy's hands? Can't see anything. So is that Ukrainian soldier killing an unarmed, injured Russian soldier at 2 meters on the battlefield? And I just go, man, if you think that there's a threat, you're allowed to use lethal force. Did he think that there was a threat? I don't know. I wasn't there, but it sure looks to me like he just shot that guy that was lying face down on the ground, and it looks like he executed the dude. Just that's what it looks like to me. I don't know, man. I wasn't there, but I look at that and I'm just like, fuck, another one, man. Another one. Over the weekend, I pulled out about 10 videos that were all outside of the rules of armed conflict. You cannot fly drones around the battlefield and drop hand grenades on injured soldiers who don't have any weapons near them at all. They have no weapons. Imagine if a dude was lying on the side of the road out the front of your house, a drone came along and dropped a hand grenade on him, and he was a gang member, and the police were dropping a hand grenade on a injured gang member. He had a broken leg. He was lying on the ground. The drone comes along, stops over the top of him, drops a hand grenade on him, and blows him up. Would the police get in trouble for that? Yeah. Well, what's the difference when the Ukrainians are doing it on the battlefield? But all day long, I see drones flying around on the battlefield, dropping hand grenades and explosive ordnance onto people that are injured and are no longer a threat. And they don't pose a threat, and they're not going to pose any more of a threat, but you're out there killing them consistently like that. I look at all of this and think, you know what? None of this is fucking real, man. This can't be happening.
Well, I think it's pretty well documented and assumed by most, honest thinking people that war atrocities have been committed in this war on both sides.
Absolutely.
And those people out there who think that Ukraine is completely innocent in this war are kidding themselves. There's no doubt in my mind that they have committed a lot of these atrocities over there. Remember, Ukraine was and is the most corrupt country in Europe. These people, I'm sorry, but they do have a certain mindset. I think they do have kind of a gangster mindset. And when you're in war, I'm sure that mindset is only exacerbated.
I'd agree. Yeah.
These people are not in the mood to pay that much attention to reading the articles of the Geneva Convention. And I haven't heard, frankly, has there been any kind of attempt by human rights organizations to send in observers? I've never heard anybody mention. I remember even in World War II, you would have the Red Cross going into Germany during the war, and they were respected for their neutrality, right? And they're treated. They got a chance to look around and check things out. Has there been any, as far as you know, has there been any kind of attempt by the UN or any other peacekeeping organization to send in?
That's a good question. Yeah, good question. To my knowledge, definitely not, because, that would ring a bell for you straight away. I definitely haven't seen anything like that. But the Ukrainians are doing it to themselves because everyone's got a GoPro and a mobile phone, and they're recording their crimes consistently. And don't worry, the Russians are just as complicit in all of this than the others. You know, I see on the Russian Telegram channels are exceptionally brutal. There is no censorship or anything like that. You know, there was, you know, I'll say it out loud here for you so you understand the scale of it. And I'll find the videos and I'll put them on the Telegram channel and you can decide if they're war crimes or not. But the Russian soldiers have captured some Ukrainians. They've killed the Ukrainians, and the guy's got his bayonet out and he's cutting the skin off the face of a Ukrainian soldier that's been killed, like slicing pieces of the guy's face off like that. And you think, and so you're interfering with the corpse and you're desecrating the corpse. Like, why are you doing that? These things are war crimes, man. This is going on. It's consistently going on. And then I see Lindsey Graham. I'll bring it home with this. I see Lindsey Graham and Senator Blumenthal standing there saying that if you do anything to this power plant, NATO's going to come in and we're going to eviscerate you. They're his words. You're not going to eviscerate anybody, mate. You're sipping on a latte in Washington in a suit, nice and comfortable. You're not eviscerating anything. You're not putting your life on the line. Your kids are not putting their life on the line. The people that you send to war are the ones that are going to have to live with the things that you've told them to go and do. It's not some kind of joke, but it's continuing to go on day in and day out. And I think maybe what's happening to me is I'm just suffering from a little bit of fatigue from all of this bullshit in the media. And the Ukrainian propaganda is like just it's a machine that just is relentless. There must be thousands of people in that propaganda machine perpetuating these stories, and like they're the noble cause, and you know, their shit doesn't stink. But the reality is they're just as bad as the Russians, man. And the crimes that they're committing are just as bad. And now we're talking about something that could potentially affect all of us. I think the solution to it is this, Ed. It's pretty simple, man. You've got to reduce your exposure to the banks. And we've seen the banks cancelling people's bank accounts in the last couple of days. That's a story that we'll be talking about. You need some gold and silver, and you need some passive income that's not dependent on you swapping your time for money. But most importantly, I think I'll add a fourth one there for us, Ed, is you've got to continue prepping while the prepping is good. Meaning you need to have at least 3 months worth of food, water, toilet paper, coffee, and all the supplies that are important to you in your home. You need that. If something happens and there's a massive EMP strike and the power goes off, you just need to make sure you've got what you need to survive for at least 1 month. If you can have 3 months, that would be awesome. It doesn't cost much money to go and buy some extra food and put it in your cupboard and just leave it there. And you just cycle through it. If anything, it saves you money because it stops you going to the shops every day buying what you need, because you're completely stocked up in your pantry and you've got what you actually need. Because, and if you're not ready for the worst possible case scenario and that happens, you're going to be one of those crazy people that are running down to Home Depot to buy an axe to go and get what you need to survive. You want to continue prepping now and prepare for the worst case scenario, because it might actually eventuate, and it might happen in the next week before this stupid NATO meeting because of these crazy people in Washington, man.
Personally, I do not think that Putin would launch a nuclear weapon for any scenario other than an existential threat on his homeland. This is why I do not want to see Zelensky succeed in his goals of taking over Crimea or taking back the Donbass. I do not want to, because I do think that that would be an existential threat, by Putin, and I think that's when nuclear bombs could fly. Other than that, I don't see it, because I think he'd have too big of a price to pay. He would be an instant pariah in the world, and I don't think he would garner any benefit. As evil as this man probably is, he's not stupid. He is actually.
So we're on the record saying he's not going to nuke anybody. I happen to agree with you. Unless it's a NATO country and NATO get involved, then he may do that. I think that's a distinct possibility. But I also want to go on the record and say the Russians are not going to blow up that power plant, man. They're not. Right. I don't believe it for a second. I don't buy into the propaganda from the Ukrainian side. I don't. I believe that propaganda is the worst we've seen in this conflict in the last 18 months. Them threatening and continuously saying and creating a narrative, and they're creating these alarmist headlines to make everybody go, oh my God, Henny Benny, the sky is falling. The Russians are evil. They're about to blow up a power. No, they're not. No, nobody on the Russian side is going to do that. Nobody, because they don't get anything out of it if they do that. But if you blow it up, if the Ukrainians blow it up, you get a lot out of it. You get NATO and you get the full force of 30-something countries coming in to assist you to destroy the Russians, and NATO get to do what they wanted to do all along, which was completely destabilize Russia. But it's at the expense of everybody.
Lindsey Graham is itching to have NATO boots on the ground in Ukraine. He is itching for it. And so this is a PR campaign to justify that move. We have to do it because
remember it's based on fact and science.
Yeah. Brought to you by the same scientists who brought you the worldwide flu.
Hey, cut it out. All right, let's take a little break and we'll be right back. In this crazy, uncertain world, we all need a way to protect and insulate ourselves from the outside forces that we simply cannot control. I'm a news junkie, and after a lifetime of constantly immersing myself in the darkness and the despair that engulfs the world, the path to shield myself and my family has become crystal clear. I want to invite you to come and join me in the Unspoken Truth community, where I'll show you how I protect my family from this crazy world. You'll get access to 3 masterclasses worth over $1,000, as well as our live events, training, and community of truthers just like you. Come on over to the unspokentruth.com.au and join us for just 50 cents a day. What are you waiting for? Get started now at the unspokentruth.com.au. Well, the Supreme Court slapped down affirmative action. Is that a good thing? Tell us about what that means to the United States and what that means to education.
Well, it's a very good thing, although I don't know how much of a difference it's actually going to make. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, affirmative action has been around for about 50 years now, and it was really designed by the liberals in order to what they thought would be balance the scales a little bit, get the lower income people, the poor people, a chance to get into colleges and universities, and for that matter, get jobs. So a lot of colleges started adopting affirmative action policies where they would give people who didn't have as high a score as their competitors, they would let them in anyway as a way of kind of diversifying the campus and diversifying. It was meant to, I think the original intentions for about a day and a half were noble, and then after that it's been pure evil. All this policy has done was to perpetuate racism. It didn't solve racism, it perpetuated it. And the worst thing they could have done was to lower the bar for people to get into Harvard, for people to get into University of North Carolina, whatever the other schools are. So they lowered the bar so that now if you go in, if you see a doctor who's a black doctor, you might think, oh, he's only a doctor because he was given a leg up. He didn't get there really on his merits. Well, do you want a doctor who only got to his degree because he was? No, you want a doctor. Yeah, you want the doctor who got there on his merits, man. And even though and now that's unfair because that black doctor probably did get there on his merits. But there's always that thought in the back of people's minds because of affirmative action. So they didn't solve an issue. They just made it worse for people. They didn't the people who've been discriminated against the most in affirmative action has been the Asian community. Now I know it's a stereotype, but it is true. It's statistically true that Asian students, regularly score much higher on standardized tests than any other group. All right. These guys, the Tiger moms and everything, they're on the kids to study. So they work really hard to get those grades. And then some person, because of his skin color, was given preference over him simply because of his skin color. Aren't
you setting people up for failure? So as you're talking about it, I'm just remembering a book I read a couple of years ago. It's on my bookshelf there. It's called Survivor. And the guy's name is Mark Wales. So Mark Wales was an officer in the Special Air Service here in Australia. And so it's his kind of biography about what he does. So he finishes with a couple of tours in Afghanistan and decides he's going to get out. But what he wants to do is he wants to go to business school. And I think he goes to, I want to say, Harvard Business School, and he has to apply to it. And he goes through the application process 3 times. And when he describes that application process, man, it's like so difficult. And the first 2 times he failed. And then the 3rd time he had somebody coach him a little bit and he got through the 3rd time. But then in his first semester, he was almost kicked out. So here's a guy who's like hanging on by his fingernails, and he's a smart dude, right? Like he's lived in the world, he's been on operations, he's an officer, he's no dill. He's not some guy straight out of high school. He's a smart dude. And he's hanging on by his fingernails about to be kicked out of this course that he'd worked so hard to get into. So I'm thinking that if they're making decisions about who to take as applicants and their scores aren't up to scratch, but they're doing it because of identity politics and virtue signaling, those people, you're setting them up for failure, because it's actually really difficult once you get in there. You've got to really you need to be that Asian student with that Asian mum going with a piece of bamboo going, fucking study, hurry up, you know? So aren't you setting them up for success doing that anyway? That's like, why would you do that to someone?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Now, although the academic standards at all the Ivy League schools, they have suffered dramatically. If you do a YouTube search, you can watch some of the YouTube videos where they do on-the-street interviews with Harvard students. So, who was the president of the United States? And, what's one person?
I don't know.
They don't know. These people are really stupid. So, there's been a real brain drain. There's been a real diminishing of the qualification. I mean, Harvard is one of those universities where you would find a course taught on lesbian dance theory. Okay, they've gone all woke, but they've been woke now for decades, right? And they've just gotten worse and worse. So the academic standards is not like a generation or two ago where if you found out someone graduated from Harvard, you're impressed because you know how hard it is to get into it, and how
Mark Wales style, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But not anymore. The people aren't impressed anymore, especially if you have like a Black lesbian female and she checks all the boxes. She might be bright, but first thing comes to mind is she only got in because which is too bad. So they're setting them up for failure. Although I think that they're given every benefit of a doubt. I'm sure that Harvard graduates people who really should not be graduating.
What about the idea that, so when you said to me this morning that you wanted to do that topic, I Googled it quickly, and I've seen that in the news in the last couple of days, so I was across it anyway, but I was looking for some text that I could put into the description here for the video as we went live. And as I'm looking, I saw a couple of articles where the schools still said, so what? You can get rid of affirmative action all you want. We're still going to do it because you can't stop us from making that decision about equity and diversity or some bullshit that goes along with all of that. So it's like a policy that had been implemented. It's like you've written racism directly into the rules and regulations related to universities, and it hasn't been taken out. It's actually only amplified the levels of racism that you have. And it just kind of reminds me of the stupid conversation happening here in Australia right now, where they're talking about implementing race back into the Constitution. Like, stop it. You should be taking that stuff out. It shouldn't matter. We're all the same. It doesn't matter what you look like or where you're from. Like, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, well, no, you're right. And this is why I said at the beginning that I think that this was an important decision, because they told the world that this was unconstitutional, this is wrong, and it's actually racist. And it actually is illegal because it is racism. Affirmative action is racist because
all the people on the left promoting equity and diversity are actually the racist ones,
right?
And the Supreme Court said it.
They're the racist because you are making a decision based on the person's skin color. That's the definition of racism. But I don't think it'll make a difference because they have a culture now at these woke cultures. They're so ingrained. Everybody is a wokist. There aren't any conservative or traditionalists in the administration, in the entrance committee, people, whatever you call them. There aren't any conservatives. So if everyone were ever to sue and say, "Oh, why did that guy in? His scores are lower than mine," they'll just say something like, "Oh, but he had a killer interview." So that's why we got
that's covered up. Where do you think all of this wokeness and craziness is leading us? Is it a self-destruct button? I was trying to bring my collection of thoughts together over the weekend. I was listening to Joe Rogan's latest interview with Ice Cube, and he was talking about how he came up through the ranks and in NWA and straight out of Compton and all of that, and all of the angry lyrics about F the police and this is the country. It's free speech, man. I can say whatever I want. You don't like it, but I'm still going to say it anyway. And the cops couldn't do anything about it. And he said in some states the police were, they'd wait for him to get off stage and then go to arrest them. And they'd get off stage and they'd have to change like clothes and get a disguise and run away from the police because they didn't want to get grabbed and stuff. And I look at all of that and I think society had reached a point there in the late 80s and late 90s where these Americans had enough of the way that they'd been treated by the police. And they came out and resisted it in the only way that they knew that they could, with music. And it was a powerful underground movement that really created something, that was deep-seated in society. And it's something that was there all the time and it bubbled to the surface. And I look at all of this woke craziness there. It's as if all of this wokeness was always there. And then I turn on my Twitter or I turn on my YouTube and I'm looking through these accounts and I'm seeing when I look at that is a man that's naked riding a push bike in front of children dancing around in a fountain in the town square. And I never realized, like when I'm listening, so I'm trying to draw a parallel, when I'm listening to Ice Cube's interview and he's talking about music and rap and how they did that. So there was an underground thing that was simmering there the whole time, that these people were really angry. And now what I'm seeing in society is that there's all these weirdo pedophiles, man, that are just below the surface of society, and they're now allowed to come out and groom children. They're allowed to come out and say all of these things and do all these things to our children, and they're continuing to do that. And then now they're riding around in the town square. If there was someone out the front now riding around on a push bike that was in their birthday suit, and I called the cops and go, hey man, there's some weirdo riding around the street on a bike with no clothes on. Can you come and do something? The police would be around here in half a minute. They'd be down here and hey mate, get in the back of the paddy wagon, let's go. Let's get you some clothes. What are you doing? Is everything okay? The cops would come and help you and take that person away. But when it's a pride protest, they're allowed to ride around in public with no clothes on. And they're allowed to do that in front of children. But what if I was the guy wearing bondage gear and I went out the front of the local primary school and started twerking in front of the mums and the children there? What would happen? Someone would call the police on me. The police would come and take me away and lock me up. But they're doing that in public now and getting away with it. It's like all of these weirdo pedophiles were there the whole time. And they've been grooming children the whole time, and now they're out in the open doing it. And I'll die on the hill, man. I'll say it. Because if you're doing that in front of children, you're grooming children. That's it. That's the reality. You're grooming kids and saying this is all right. It's all right for you to come out and be naked in front of people and to do that. And these mothers and fathers allowing that to happen, they're just as bad. You're complicit.
Well, this is the predictable end result of a culture of what I would call, unlimited tolerance, where you have to be able to tolerate everybody. Because once you start going down that slippery slope, as soon as you start criticizing a segment, then you're not being tolerant anymore. So all these groups that and society as a whole, shame serves a purpose. Shame is good in a society. Okay, if we as a society look down, if we put shame on people who are I don't want to say that word, Petes, we'll call it peds. If we say as a society, that's not acceptable, that's a shameful act, that is shameful, okay, that's a good thing. Shame is a way of putting the boundaries in society. What do we consider good and bad? And as soon as you start removing those barriers where you can't shame anything, you have to tolerate everything. And well, then all bets are off, because we're seeing right now the exaggeration of that, and we're seeing the predictable end result of that, because every aggrieved area of the society that before felt shamed, now they're gonna say, well, what about me? Why should I feel shameful about my deviant behavior? And then the other people, they have to say, well, okay, I guess you're right. Okay, all right, so we'll celebrate you too.
It's very weird, isn't it? And I asked you, where is this going? What actually happens? in some ways, I think this is like the self-destruct button of society. There was we have a program funded by the government here in Australia on the ABC News channel, right? The Australian Broadcasting Commission. They're funded to the tune of $1 billion a year. And they have a program called Q&A. And they have this woke leftist, left-leaning, greenie journalists there that are asking these woke leftist greenies questions about society, trying to represent that this is what Australian society is. And there's some jerk on there that's some trans guy that's on there without all of his makeup and everything like that. And someone, I'm not grooming children. I'm not doing this. And I'm just going in and reading them story time saying that it's okay to be yourself and do that. It's like, dude, what is a grown man doing talking to young children about identity? And because if you look at the statistics of how many men are school teachers, primary or elementary school teachers versus women, there's not that many guys.
Right.
And it's the same as statistics related to how many male nurses there are related to female nurses. And it's got nothing to do with gender. It's got to do with what people are attracted to in terms of a job. Men are attracted to doing things with their hands and building things and engineering type things, and women are generally attracted to doing things with people and interacting with people on a social level. And not all of those stereotypes apply, of course. That's why you have male nurses and you have male primary school teachers as well. There's nothing wrong with that. But this guy is not a school teacher. Yet he didn't go to university for 4 years to try and make society better and have an influence on young people and do all these things. He's a man that goes around dressed as a woman telling children it's okay to be whoever you want to be. And the Australian government is perpetuating that message to our society with an audience of, it's an echo chamber of an audience who are clapping like communist seals like this. They're clapping in front of their face like communist seals saying that this is okay. You should be doing that. You should be doing that. But I tell you what, man, if that guy was in my primary school where my daughter was and I found out that was happening, you get a punch in the face. Like, really, you have no right to talk to my daughter about those things.
Right.
None.
That's right. Well, that's because you're a good dad. You're a man. You're a good dad. And we've seen the past couple of years, we've seen PTA meetings where parents have shown up at school board meeting expressing that exact anger. Right?
Now you're considered a domestic terrorist.
There you go. Exactly. And for doing that, the government considers you a domestic terror. Exactly. So the government.
Isn't that shocking, man?
So the government, and who's in charge of the government? The wokeists. Right? They've got the guns. They've got the power. So not only can they shame you, but they can put you in jail, and they can threaten you. They can make your life miserable from an official level, from a governmental level. Look, the only thing evil needs to succeed is for good people to do nothing. Right, and this is kind of the dilemma here, right? Because your average good person are what you would call agreeable versus non-agreeable. They just want to live their lives, right? Go ahead and live your life. Just leaving, as long as it doesn't affect me, live and let live. So what you call agreeable. But those are the people who get all the attention. The people who get all the attention, get things done, are the noisemakers, the disagreeable people, and they happen to be the liberals. I do think that there is a silent majority out in the world. I do think that America is a center-right country in aggregate, but the leftists, they own the government, they own the schools, but I think there is a point at which the silent majority will make their voices heard, and so wherever that ouch point happens to be in any one topic, we saw the outrage over those tuck bathing suits out of Target a few days ago, the Bud Light controversy. There is a point where they will stand up and say, no more. And now we need to do them at election time. We need to give them, voting more. So
we hear about inclusivity and affirmative action and all of this stuff, and let's close it out with this, Ed, because I think it's a really important point, man, that people understand where you stand on these issues and where I stand on these issues. And for me, everybody is out there pretending like, the example that I can think of is, look, we don't not like the Chinese people. We just don't like the Chinese Communist Party. But I got news for you, folks. The Chinese Communist Party is the Chinese people. That's what it is. There's 2 million people in their military. They're all Chinese communists. And if you don't like the general population, then you don't like it doesn't make any sense. And you know, when people say, oh, you should be free to live your life. You should be free to do whatever you want. You can live how you want. You can sleep with whoever you want, so long as it's consensual and it doesn't affect anybody. I'm sick of that argument, because I think that argument placates to the left, and that gives them license to continue to do what it is that they want to do. I'll stand and die on this hill that anybody that's a man, that's dressed as a woman, that goes into a woman's change rooms is a weirdo.
He's a pervert.
You're a fucking weirdo.
He's a deviant.
That's all there is to it. And if there's a woman dressed as a man in the male change rooms, I'll grab you by the collar and I'm going to turf you out into the other change rooms. Get out, you fucking idiot. Like, I'm not going to have it. And I don't care about inclusion or equity or any of this. This is just all bullshit. You're just placating to the left. And there's such a small percentage of those people in our society, but everybody has to have extreme tolerance of it all. But I'm sorry, I live in a free society. I don't tolerate it. I'm not going to tolerate it. I'm not going to tolerate it. If I see a woman in a male change room, I'm not going to ask her to leave. I'm going to grab her by the collar and actually get her out of there. Get out. And if my daughter goes in somewhere and there's a guy in those change rooms, I'll go in there and drag him out as well, the same way.
I was just waiting for you to say, you know, if a woman showed up at the men's, you'll ask for her phone number, maybe.
Get out, you fucking weirdo. Get out.
Yeah, can I get
freaks, man. Yeah, freaks of society. There was a picture going around in Twitter the other day of a man dressed as a woman with an erection inside of a female change room, in female toilets. And, you know, then the caption said something like, this is not about inclusion, this is their fetish. And we're enabling their fetish at scale, you know, where they can go and do that wherever they want, whenever they want. But here's the unspoken truth, and maybe the reality as well. I've been in a lot of public toilets in my life, like everybody, and I've never seen a woman in a man's toilet. And I don't know anybody, actually, that is a woman that has seen a man in a woman's toilet either. So it only exists in the imagination of the media. In reality, because there's almost nobody in society like that, because it's 0.01% of people that are like that. So the chances of you encountering that are next to nothing. But they force us to talk about it because it's all about inclusion and it's all about attention. And a man that goes around dressed up as a woman in drag is all about attention. And I'm sorry, I don't care what anybody says. I'm entitled to my opinion. You want me to be inclusive and equitable to those people, and I just don't want to be. And I don't have to be. I don't have to be the way that they tell me to be. And just because you don't like the way that I am, you can't, now you're going to call me a homophobe or a racist or a white supremacist or fucking, you know what, sticks and stones, that I just don't care what you call me. It doesn't matter, because I'm entitled to my beliefs. I'm entitled to say that Australia Day is the 26th of January and you can't cancel Australia Day or call it Invasion Day anymore. Die. I don't care. Die. I don't care. I don't care what you say. But that's the thing. They think that we care, but we actually don't care. And yeah, man, I'm over the conversation. But what about this final point, Ed? So the Supreme Court strikes down affirmative action and goes, you can't do that. It's racist. And then everybody goes, we're still going to do it anyway. Like there is some good people trying to do good things to try and make society better. But the people on the left just dismiss that completely.
Well, this is what the left does. When the Supreme Court comes to, has an announcement they don't agree with, then the Supreme Court is evil. They should be abolished. They should be impeached. You know, they're not going to follow the law. But when they rule in their favor, we as conservatives, we have to swallow it, and we have swallowed a lot the past 20 years by the Supreme Court. A lot of garbage. You know, so. You know, it just goes to show that the liberals, you know, they're poor losers. They're not. It's all about them. You know, they don't believe. They're hypocrites across the board. That's the best word I can think of. You know, they're hypocrites. They do not believe in free speech. They believe in just the opposite. They want to control your speech. Anyway, so. Boy, now I gotta settle down. Now I've gotta, you know, have a.
We're gonna calm down in our conversation. Cool. As always, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Thanks for your comments and your interactions. We really appreciate that. Don't forget, The Unspoken Truth is available as a podcast over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. Come on over and join us in the Telegram channel. I'll put those war crime videos in there, and you decide for yourself if they're war crimes or not. Come and have a checkers. I'll put a little screen over the front of it there, so if you don't want to see it, you won't see it unless you actually click on it. Just remember, if you click on something like that, folks, you cannot unsee it. So just be careful. It is real life, it is war, and it is brutal. And if you're not used to seeing things like that, it can be quite disturbing. So it just comes with a warning. If you're going to come over and join us on Telegram, just be careful what you click on over there. Make sure you come on over and follow us on Twitter as well. We're getting a few more followers coming over there, which is really good. I like that. I'm enjoying the engagement over there. I'm enjoying the free speech. There's a lot of stuff over there in and around what's happening in France. It's pretty alarming what's going on in that part of the world, and it's worth keeping up to date in that unfiltered source over there that seems to be not curated and not censored at all. It's a good thing, I reckon. So pop on over and join us. All of the links are in the description. Ed, before we get out of here today, mate, have you got a final quote?
Oh boy, a quote. No, I don't. Sorry, it's 4th of July here, man. I'm just relaxing. No, just please hit that like button, though. Please be sure to smash the like button.
All right, and God save the Queen. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now. See you, everyone.